Veterans reported for Cincinnati Bengals training camp, which means it's time to talk about Joe Burrow's hair for a bit before we get to the rest of the important key takeaways before training camp practices open on Wednesday.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network here on Locked On Bengals, covering your team every day. We've got you covered throughout training camp, through the preseason, into the regular season, of course, on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. Today, we're going to start by discussing Joe Burrow's new hair because we're a Bengals podcast, and that's what we do. We talk about the waves Joe Burrow makes in the world, and Joe Burrow certainly made waves on Tuesday when the Bengals released a photo of his new haircut. We're also going to talk about plenty of football-specific topics, including Duke Tobin commenting that there's no veteran addition coming at cornerback, and the opportunities ahead for second-year players Chase Brown and Andrei Iosivas, and more takeaways from those comments from Duke Tobin and others at the media luncheon on Monday. But James, in this episode brought to the folks by Gametime, where people can get tickets with a promo code for $20 off, Locked On NFL. We'll get you $20 off your first purchase in the Gametime app. Today we start, as we often do, with Joe Burrow and that buzz cut going from a Hollywood offseason and Paris fashion model to buzz cut to Eminem in the course of a couple of weeks.
Yeah, right. A bunch of different looks. I like this one the best. I wonder why. I wonder why I like this one the best, considering I may need to go to Joe's barber from now on, because clearly Joe's barber knows how to handle blondes. The funny thing is he bleached his hair, and for years, literally probably more than a decade, I've had different people cut my hair because it isn't a big deal and I don't stress about it. Who cares, right? Been getting the same haircut. And randomly, there'll be people that are like, do you bleach your hair? And so now Joe has to say, yeah, I bleach my hair, even though everyone knows what Joe's hair normally looks like. So, haha, Joe, you have to say that. This is natural for me. And yet, it's not just Joe. As we're recording this, Jamar Chase, hair cut off as well. All business. I know T. Higgins' hair, same way. So maybe this was a decision made, and Joe looked at his hair without the blonde and said, we were all buzzing anyway. I'm going to go with the bleach blonde look. So I like it. I'm biased. Slim Shiesty makes a ton of sense from a nickname standpoint. So hashtag that. And hopefully Slim Shiesty is ready to go on Wednesday.
It's an act of solidarity with his wide receivers then to cut off the hair and show that he's all business for this season.
You know what it sounds like to me? 5,000 yards for Joe, 1,500 plus for Jamar, and 1,300 plus for T. That's what it sounds like to me.
Push those wide receivers receiving numbers up a little bit if we're talking 5,000 passing yards, I would say. It's funny because of how much, and most of it's tongue-in-cheek, analysis there is over this sort of thing. Like, it was a Barstool Big Cat. Bengals, want to go put a bet on the Bengals to win the Super Bowl. Many have speculated that this is, in fact, a sign from Joe Burrow that I'm putting that Paris offseason stuff behind me. It's time to be serious. This is not a fun go do new things in Paris haircut anymore. This is a get serious about football haircut. And maybe it is. Maybe we'll hear from Joe Burrow in the near future, and he'll talk about why he cut his hair. I'm sure he will be asked about the haircut. I'm sure it will be a very simple explanation. That would be my expectation, but maybe it will be the clear-cut answer of, that it's time to put that offseason behind and focus on what's going on this year and get on the same page as Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, who both also cut off quite long hair for both of those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might be that simple. All business, and yet in typical Joe fashion, he spices it up a little bit with the bleach. And I don't blame him if that's the route he wants to go. He's
done it before, too, which is notable. Back to the Athens, Ohio high school football days.
For sure. And I think that's part of it. The other part of this, honestly, I do think he was sick of dealing with his hair. His hair took a lot. And as playing football, he was always. I'm sure he's happy to just focus on ball now, and maybe his next bleaching. Is that what they call it? I don't know. Never had the problem.
Who knows? There won't be a dramatic change in hairstyle for Joe Burrow anytime soon because the nature of buzz cuts means that in order to change the style significantly, besides going shorter, you need to wait for it to grow. So we probably won't be talking about Joe Burrow's hair unless he does a crazy color that is not bleach blonde. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's the setup to start doing Dennis Rodman hair this year. And he needed to get it nice and light so that he could get other colors with it.
See, you're scaring Bengals fans now with the Dennis Rodman reference. I wonder if the other element was, hey, we'll cut it after New Orleans.
Just from now, like playoff hair, but starting before.
Yeah. Like let's all start with short hair. We'll cut it after New Orleans. That's that. I don't know if it's the case. We'll find out Wednesday, probably late afternoon, when Joe is scheduled to talk with the media. But all right, I think that's enough on hair, even though I approve because I have short blonde hair as well. But cornerback's a big topic, the biggest battle, I would say, in training camp. And there's a bunch of them, but the number one battle is that starting cornerback job, between DJ Turner, the second, and Dax Hill. And Duke Tobin's comments, I know you saw these, Jake, but I don't know if everyone saw them. I'll read some of them in just a second. I was a bit surprised at how upfront he was about this, but he was talking with the writers. It was early during Monday's media day. And he said, are we going to sign a veteran? No, probably not. I like what we've got there. We've got young guys that can run and cover, who have a lot of upside to them. We've got some guys working in there, and it will be exciting to see how they do. Do I feel like we have an immediate need for a veteran to make our team? No. So pretty black and white there for Duke Tobin, at least at this stage.
Yeah, contrasts to previous years where they've made it a habit. I wouldn't say a priority. I was trying to figure out what word was appropriate there to add a veteran corner in the preseason at some point. Somebody who is experienced, who just played in the NFL, who can be that guy off the bench if they needed him. Last year's corner that they added, Sidney Jones, didn't make a huge impact on the team. So maybe they're looking at it and thinking, okay, we've added Josh Newton. We're going to get DJ Ivey back at some point this year. DJ Turner's in his second year. We've added Dax Hill to the cornerback room. They're looking at it and they're probably thinking we've added now 3 guys in the first 2 rounds to the corner room in 2 drafts between 2022 and 2023. In addition to that, DJ Ivey, if and when he gets healthy for this season, they draft Josh Newton this year. They obviously have and love Mike Hilton. They really like Jalen Davis in the slot as well. And Alan George has been with the team as a college since 2022 as a college free agent. So they're probably sitting there thinking like they have a lot of depth. They have a lot of bodies, and they do. It's just there's a lot of unproven bodies there. They're very confident in Cam Taylor-Britt. The discussion around Cam Taylor-Britt's name is, defensive captain kind of stuff in the near future for him. If it's not this year, it's probably next year. The leadership and recognition of that leadership is growing for Cam Taylor-Britt. Mike Hilton has been the veteran in the room for a long time. And, well, I guess not a long time. He's now the veteran in the room and is the best player at his position in the room coming into the season. Mm-hmm. And so it would be, do they need another veteran to push DJ Turner and Dax Hill? I think you and I still have a different answer from the team there, where we would feel more comfortable with veteran additions at a few positions. And I think corner is still included there. But I also understand, I guess, their perspective where they feel like they've added a ton of guys here in the last few years. And now it's time to see which of those guys emerges.
Yeah, I think I would have done it 2 months ago.
Right.
And so now it's like, all right, well, let's see where the young guys are. And then if you still have to make a veteran addition, you still can, because there are some guys out there. But I get it. And I also think it is a testament to how confident they are in Dax's potential and in how real it is that there's a battle there. And it's probably 51-49 or 50-50 going into Wednesday's practice. So I'm excited to see that as well. We have a ton of other takeaways, football stuff, non-hair talk that we will get to coming up next. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. If you want to get in the game, get to the game, watch the Bengals and the Patriots on September 8th, or maybe you're planning a trip to Great American Ballpark in the near future to watch Ellie De La Cruz, the most electrifying man in baseball. Well, you got to get the Gametime app, because Gametime is the app that's going to make your life so much easier, whether you want to go to Major League Baseball games, concerts, any event this summer, or of course, Bengals games. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and views from your seat. And the views from your seat, they're panoramic. So you're going to know exactly what it's going to feel like sitting in the seats you're looking at. And the all-in pricing is great because there's no hidden fees. You know exactly what you're getting for your money. So don't delay. Download Gametime and take advantage of all of their last-minute deals that they have to offer by downloading the Gametime app, creating an account, and using code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Let's continue with some thoughts on Chase Brown and Andrei Iosivas, James. Some very interesting comments from the Bengals de facto GM, Duke Tobin, when asked about the second-year opportunity for those two players. I think that the bullishness on those two from the Bengals leader and Duke Tobin in that regard was interesting. Not necessarily terribly surprising to hear a vote of confidence. He was asked directly about those two, but he backed it up with some pretty detailed and specific reasons that he's bullish on the future for those guys. And there was even a surprising note to me about where Andrei Iosivas is potentially going to play this year. Mm-hmm. What were your thoughts on Duke Tobin's comments on Chase Brown and Andrei Iosivas, which I have the quotes. I can read those in just a minute here.
Yeah, I'll toss it back to you. I was there for the Yoshi, he can play everywhere type of comment. And what's interesting about that is I don't think Andrei has been as upfront about the idea of him playing everywhere. Not that he's not willing. I think he's willing to do anything. I asked him if you'd go on kickoff returns, and he was like, hell yeah, I would love that. So he's just eager to go out there and make an impact any way he can. But we haven't seen it yet. And you want to talk about throwing a wrench into things? Can you imagine if Andrei Iosivas takes another step? I will say this, because we don't know yet. I know a lot of people are banking on him, but he looks the part. Like, he clearly bulked up. He has the size. We know he has the athleticism and the speed. He earned the trust of Joe Burrow in the red zone. We know he's intelligent. So it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in here, because he is a sixth rounder. I get it. But really, from the moment he walked in that building, it didn't feel like he was a sixth rounder. And there's some trust there. And obviously he has the skill set to potentially make an impact early on.
Yeah, the bit on Andrei Iosivas that was very interesting is exactly what you said. With Andrei, he can go in at any wide receiver position. That snippet of a quote from Duke Tobin, when contrasted with what Andrei Iosivas himself said when he was talking about where he was going to play earlier this offseason, really stood out to me. If that's a guy that they're looking at getting on the field at any wide receiver position, and they have really two guys that you feel really good about lining up everywhere, and a guy in T. Higgins who could certainly line up at either outside position and is not a stranger entirely to the slot, although he certainly, I think, is more of a pure outside guy than Jamar Chase, who has shown the versatility to line up and win from everywhere on the football field. If you have that kind of positional versatility, and we've talked about this a lot with the wide receivers this year, that is a bonus for your offensive design. When you put guys on the field, the defense doesn't know exactly who is going to be where. Not that they ever do, but having guys that are more comfortable in multiple roles at those receiver positions, I think, is a bonus for your offense in terms of scheme versatility. If they get the same thing out of Jermaine Burton, and maybe it's not immediate, but if Jermaine Burton's path takes him down that same road, you've got a bunch of very versatile pieces. If Andrei Iosivas shows that he is a starting level receiver in this league, if Jermaine Burton is a starting level receiver in this league to go along with Jamar Chase, the future for the Bengals wide receiver position is very bright. And this was before training camp in Iosivas' second year. So there's a long way for Andrei to go. And so let's not get too far, cart ahead of horse here. But I did think that the bullishness was interesting, and I can read that part of the quote as well, where he's talking about both of them, but specifically the mention about any position for Yoshi was a bit of a surprise to hear from Duke Tobin.
Yeah, I think as you're describing that, maybe the Bengals' long-term vision of this wide receiver room, it clearly involves Jamar Chase, despite the weird stuff that kind of dropped nationally, which we can make fun of on another day. But that's why you listen to Locked On Bengals, because, well, Mike Brown said they're going to bend over backwards to keep Jamar. But I love the idea of some versatile, athletic, downfield threats that are different. Jermaine Burton is a different player than Andrei Iosivas. If those guys are versatile as well, well, then you can still probably maximize Jamar Chase. You can be versatile in what you do from a scheme standpoint on offense, and you can survive not having a guy like T. Higgins. It doesn't feel like they're going to have T. Higgins long term, but even a guy like T. Higgins long term. And so maybe that's kind of their hope that these guys develop into that. Of course, they might very well draft a receiver as early as round 1 next year. You just never know. But I could see the long-term plan coming together. And you mentioned the bullishness on Chase Brown. Read that quote as well, because as high as you could be on Andre, we know Chase is going to get a ton of touches this year. Andre, it's still speculation to a degree. Chase Brown is going to be in the mix from day one as far as touches go.
Yeah, Duke Tobin was asked about these guys, and his response was that I expect them to step forward because of what they've done in the past. They've shown that they can take on more. A lot of times young guys show they might not be ready to take on more, but both those guys have shown, hey, there's a bigger role for me, and both those guys are worthy of it. And with Chase, he said the sky's the limit. He has a chance to be the guy. And he also, of course, referred to Zach Moss's presence on the team, and of course, the potential of a running back by committee there, or, the chance that Chase Brown is just the number 2 guy. But for late round picks for this team last year, to get that kind of note from Duke Tobin, the juxtaposition of guys who sometimes are not ready to take on more versus them showing that they're worthy of a bigger role, I think is a big endorsement from the guy that drafted them, the guy that led the draft room last year and made those selections, because that's not always the case. It's not always the case that we didn't hear this about Jackson Carman. You're not hearing that about Charlie Jones, although there wasn't a specific question about Charlie Jones. And I don't say that to cast doubt onto Charlie Jones' future, but just to say that no other players got that kind of praise specifically last year. And thinking back to some players that needed to take a second year step. Like, we're still not hearing that about Joseph Ossai, for example, right? You're hearing from Lou Anarumo that Joseph Ossai needs to show that he can stay healthy, and he's excited for his ability to come into camp, not coming off an injury, not coming off rehab, and he's excited to see what he can do. But it's not like, yeah, Joseph Ossai has shown there's a bigger role for him, and he's worthy of that right now. He still needs to show something, whereas the comments on these guys are, yeah, there's training camp ahead, but they've shown that they're worthy of earning an opportunity to take that bigger role now available to them.
Yeah, just because you mentioned it, Duke Tobin was asked about Joseph Ossai during the writer's session, and I had to transcribe it, so I might as well just mention it here because I know there's a lot of people interested in Ossai. Duke said, quote, "I believe in Joseph. He's one that's put the most work in since last year to improve himself. He's got to stay healthy. He's had the wrist that has held him back a little bit. I think he's feeling good. He'll have to show that. Joseph can rush. He's a guy that football matters to a lot. He wants to be good, and he's got the traits to be good. My expectations are probably lower than his, and his expectations appear to be very high. We need guys that can come in and fill in and give us quality snaps as pass rushers, and Joseph has a high ceiling. He's a young guy with a lot of physical traits, so I'm looking forward to seeing him progress." So to your point, there's clear upside and some excitement if he can stay healthy, but it's not the same as, oh my goodness, these guys, sky is the limit is a word that Duke used to describe Chase and Andre. And that wasn't there for Joseph. And part of it is because of the health. And I would have a disclaimer too, if you've been hurt in each of your first 3 seasons on and off a little bit, and Ossai has dealt with injuries. So it's a big year for him, no doubt.
I do think Ossai is a big X factor, though, going into training camp, thinking about the things that could subvert expectations for this team and take the team in a direction that we don't necessarily anticipate. If Joseph Ossai does hit that upside, what a boost it would be for this team. We'll wrap up with the rest of the key takeaways before training camp opens. That's coming tomorrow to finish up the show coming up next.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's time to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
James, there are a few other key notes to get to here before training camp opens. The next one were, in my mind, Duke Tobin's comments on Amarius Mims and that competition, which does sound like it is, in fact, a competition. The front office remains very bullish on Mims' future. And while Trent Brown certainly has a lot of stability and thinks that he can come in and win that job, a lot of experience, I should say, at right tackle in the NFL and high quality island pass protector type experience. Another guy for whom the sky is the limit is Amarius Mims. And if he comes in and is ready to take that job and is the best player at right tackle, that sounds like it could be a competition and one that I think we'll get a feel for pretty quickly. But what are your thoughts about what Duke Tobin had to say about Amarius Mims and a potential competition there?
How excited they were to get him at 18. I don't think, like, I know there's the Byron Murphy discussion at the time and all of those things. I think the Bengals had Amarius Mims extremely high on their board, and they realized how rare he was. And this is our first time hearing from Duke about the draft. And so that's why some of these questions came up. And the fact that they were able to get him at 18, he said a lot of the same things that we heard from some of the coaches. He's a top 4, top 5 guy in a lot of drafts. And so they really like all of his traits, size, attitude, mindset, all the pre-draft scouting stuff about intangibles. And yes, he absolutely has a shot in this battle. And I was thinking back, the last time we had heard from Duke was the NFL Combine. He said this exact scenario to us. Hey, who knows? Maybe we get a veteran and draft a tackle early. It's exactly what they did. And you don't do that to just hand the job to the veteran. Now, should Trent Brown win this competition? He probably should. He has a lot to gain this year, or a lot to prove this year to reestablish his NFL value. And so I'm not going to judge Amarius if he doesn't win the starting job, but he very much is in the running right now, has an opportunity to do so. And like Duke said, I think it's going to come down to Frank, how he feels, obviously how Zach feels. But starters are playing in the preseason, so I think we'll see both guys get a decent amount of playing time, and that's great to see.
I hope it's a real competition, because my feeling, if you remember what I said, going back to around when they drafted Mims, when we were heading into the draft, and I said a few times on repeat, if they draft a tackle in the first round, he should come in and should be competing in this tackle class for a starting spot, because it was a very, very strong tackle class. Amarius Mims, of course, the least experienced out of the first round options, but was a guy that has all the traits in the world, as we know, has the size and athleticism. And when he was on the field, the tape that shows that he should be a very good player in the NFL. And Duke Tobin even said it's kind of a matter of time for him. It's a matter of when, not if. Talking about when, not if for Jamar Chase's extension yesterday, which got to various members of the national media in partial quotes out of context, which you're right, we could talk about either now or another time. Amarius Mims to Duke Tobin is those guys figure it out. Guys with those traits, with that size, with that ability, figure it out. And it's just a matter of when, not if. And if that when is in training camp, like I said, I hope it's a real competition, because that was my feeling going into the draft, was that any tackle they do draft in the first round should be hitting the ground and competing with Trent Brown to be a starter from day one. Not that they necessarily would win that job, but they should have the capability of winning that job if you're spending a first-round pick on that player.
Well, and I think he's the guy, and he's the most raw. He also has the highest ceiling of anyone in that room, period.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of when does the light click on all the way. It may happen quick. It really might. And it may take 8 games. It may take this season where he's backing up and learning from both Trent Brown and Orlando Brown Jr. Who knows? But I do think it will be a competition. Now, competition is relative. If he's so far behind and it's clear Trent is just light years ahead right now, well, then that's it. And so that's it. Now, is Amarius good enough to make it a real competition? Right now, I think that's the fun question that we will get answered probably as soon as, well, when you're in town. Probably not this week, I'll be honest. But as soon as early August, when Jake Lisco is in town, I may try to convince him, ladies and gentlemen, to get that buzz cut. It's buzz cut season. I don't know if I'll get him to bleach it, but maybe buzz cut.
Fun fact, I'm not very susceptible to peer pressure, especially when the lights aren't on.
Oh,
but generally,
dude, I know. Lame loser. What a bum. Oh my God. I'm not going to bring up all the times I've tried to peer pressure you. Not many to be honest. But yeah.
I had another football thing, and I've lost that thought, and I don't think it's going to come back.
You know the beauty. Okay, go ahead.
It was just about the competition. Like we'll probably get a feel in the next week if Amarius Mims is getting no reps with the first unit. Well, there's probably not a competition there. And coaches would tell us don't read too much into who's playing with who and when early in camp. But certainly if like there's a theme pretty quick for the first week and a half of camp where Mims is working with the twos consistently, then you'll know. You'll have your sign. Things could certainly change if he comes on later in camp and then starts to earn reps with the ones a little bit more, maybe even after the first preseason game. If we see him taking reps with the ones in the second preseason game, maybe there's even a plan to give him reps with the ones at some point in the preseason, with the plan being to play starters in the preseason this year. Maybe we'll see that in the joint practices. I don't want to take that away from him, but while we won't know for sure for a little bit of time, we'll get a feel for some of these rotations early on and where these guys are coming into camp. And that should give us some idea, at least. And it's something that we monitor throughout camp because those changes often are meaningful in terms of guys earning more of an opportunity or losing an opportunity as camp progresses.
Yep. It's here, Jake. It's here. And yeah, well, we have to talk about buzz cuts. If Joe Burrow does it, that's fine. But we're going to have football to talk about on our next show. What I was going to say is the beauty is we have a show every day, 5 times a week. There's no other Bengals podcast doing that through training camp. So subscribe on YouTube and follow wherever you get your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review where on that podcast platform. So a bunch of Bengals fans will see that and be like, oh, maybe I should listen to these guys, because believe it or not, there are a lot of Bengals fans that do not listen and subscribe to Locked On Bengals yet.
We're always looking to grow the Locked On Bengals community. Good shout. Appreciate all you out there who have done those things. By the way, appreciate all you out there who make us an everyday part of the routine, who make us your first listen. Love those habits from our Locked On Bengals listeners. I suppose there's no other under the radar stories you want to bring up from the media luncheon before we get out of here. And we'll be back, of course, with a recap from Wednesday's first practice. But I just wanted to give you an opportunity in case there was anything else you heard that we have not heard yet out of videos or whatever that you wanted to bring up before we get out of here.
No, not really. The thing that a lot of people have heard is Mike Brown admitting what he said to Joe on the golf cart. He was going to tell Joe not to play ahead of that Rams game. And Joe basically asked him for a shot and ultimately did play. And thank goodness he did, because it saved their season. They win 19-16. He goes, I looked up the numbers today, 26 of 49, which sounded bad, but they had no running game, and was able to keep them afloat and get them to 1-2. So Mike has done that in the past. He did that with AJ Green on Christmas Eve, I believe, in Houston in 2016. Said, hey, you're not playing, AJ. Get your butt back on that plane and go celebrate with your with your family. We're out of it already. So this was obviously a different circumstance, but Mike has done that. It also shows the power that Joe Burrow has and how important he is. And if he says, give me a shot, he's going to get a shot. And I would expect him to have that same mindset during regular season play this year as well.
I thought it was interesting to hear Mike Brown share that story in the first place. It seemed like he was quite embarrassed by it, actually, which is interesting to hear that perspective from the Bengals owner.
He doesn't like the spotlight being on him.
Right.
Period. But certainly
Right.
football wise, ahead of a big Monday night game, like I'm sure he started to, I wrote about it. We talked about it multiple times on the pod.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was like, because he is one of those everydayers that is definitely listening to Locked On Bengals.
He's like, man, those guys, I don't want to hear my name on the Locked On Bengals podcast. Can't have that. Last note for me, this will be a quick one, was I found it very interesting how focused Lou Anarumo was on the pass defense in general, the pass rush and disrupting passers, the awareness that we've heard from this team on the offensive side of the ball, that passing is going to win you games in the NFL. Heard that from Lou Anarumo's side of the ball as well, where Lou's focus, we spent a lot of time talking about the run defense and replacing DJ Reader in the run game and all these things. And I still think that is something that this team has to address, but very interesting to hear Lou Anarumo's focus on disrupting the passer, both from a pass rush perspective and a coverage perspective, and that being the initial thrust of his focus on his side of the ball as training camp is coming up. And so we'll probably talk a lot about pass rushes. We'll probably talk a lot about corners here over the next few weeks. We will have, as you mentioned, James, football to talk about. The Bengals' first training camp practice coming up on Wednesday. We will have your takeaways shortly after that practice here on the Locked On Bengals podcast. So until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.